Verdian. I am, as always, Bad Tempered Badger, and I am here this evening to talk about Disney's latest Star Wars rip-off film, The Rise of Skywalker. So, as you are no doubt aware, if you have been to any of my recent streams or videos or discussions on other people's channels or anything of that nature, I'm not a huge fan of Disney Star Wars. Disney Skywalker. I'm not a huge fan of that either. In fact, the treatment of Luke Skywalker is one of my quite specific issues with their recent attempts. Now, I recently watched The Rise of Skywalker. And while I think it was better than The Last Jedi, that doesn't by any means, or any stretch of the imagination, mean I think it was good. So I thought I'd go through the notes I took while watching that film, and also a few other little talking points that I've thought of since and done some reading on, and have a little chat about what I think is wrong with it. There will, of course, be spoilers. Obviously, why are you here if you're not expecting spoilers? Now, I'm going to, for the moment, put aside the obvious problem I have with it, which is that the rest of Star Wars Disney continuity overwrites and replaces my personal investment in Star Wars, which has been the expanded universe, which has been going for over 30 years at this point. I've been reading Star Wars books for at least, and then Disney came along, bought the rights, and essentially decided, oh, well, fuck you, Badger. All that stuff you've been reading for the last 20 years, that doesn't exist anymore. We don't care. Fuck you for liking. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to make our own expanded universe, which is going to override everything that you care about. But I'm going to ignore that for the minute and just pretend, for the sake of argument, that I'm willing to give Disney a chance at rewriting history. I was when The Force Awakens came out. I'm not anymore. But let's, for the sake of argument, say that I am. So, Force Awakens opened, set us up some new characters and new storylines, which didn't quite make sense when you really thought about them, but they were there. Potential, like Finn, for example, a deserting stormtrooper, been raised entirely under the thumb of the Empire rip-off First Order. That could have been a character with some depth. That could have really gone somewhere. Didn't, but it could have. Now, what's Luke Skywalker been up to? He's been off on some planet somewhere for some time. Nobody knows where he is. That could have been interesting. They could have gone somewhere interesting with it, but again, they didn't. We wrap up The Rise of... No, we don't. We wrap up The Last Jedi with them in a difficult situation. It's only Leia and Rey and a few other people, Finn and Poe, and a few others still aboard a small ship, the Millennium Falcon, and they're pretty much out of people. That's not the case at the start of The Rise of Skywalker. They've suddenly got some more people. Where did they get them from? It's not specified. Who are any of these people? Why is that guy from Lord of the Rings in it? I don't know. But the film opens with Palpatine sending a message to Kylo Ren. Why does he do this? It doesn't really make any sense why he would do this. As we discover later in the film, he doesn't need the First Order. Why does he contact them? Nobody knows. The opening crawl reads like it was written by an intern on the lunch break. It's not a good opening crawl. It does set the scene, but the scene is not good. And it doesn't give us any context. It just gives us a quick 3-paragraph rundown of where we are now. And it's, oh dear. Apparently, JJ decided to fix one issue, though, which is that Rey has not been trained. She's now been training with Leia for a little while. Leia suddenly being competent to train her in the ways of the Jedi is a completely new thing that they've just added. If you take the storyline from the previous 2 films, if you read the books, of course she's been trained by Luke Skywalker and others in the ways of the Jedi. But that wasn't in the films, so they pulled it out their ass for the film purposes. In the opening, we see Kylo killing some peeps. He still doesn't know how to use a lightsaber. He's holding it backwards for half of it. And not backwards in any kind of productive way. He's just running along, not using his lightsaber properly. Then he gets a MacGuffin device and he goes somewhere. My note for that bit is he or is he not the Supreme Leader of the First Order? Why is he faffing around by a fighter? Why doesn't he bring his entire massive army with him? Oh look, he's turned up on a planet with Palpatine on it. How's Palpatine got there? We don't know. And the planet, this is the first appearance of this planet called Exegol. It is the only mention of it, and it's why they couldn't have used any of the other several Sith-oriented planets that are already existing in the expanded universe, like Korriban, or what's that other one called? Droman Cores. Why they couldn't use any of those, we'll never know. They just decided to pull another one out their ass because why not? They're pulling the whole story out their ass. They might as well pull the place it's set out of it as well. My next note is Chewie looks too smooth. He looks like Chewbacca, but with hair gel. He looks like somebody's bought him a comb. However, we've got Finn and Poe back together, and their banter is pretty good. They have some fun banter back and forth. They're playing that chess game on the Falcon with Chewie, and it looks like they're having a good time, even though they're in a tense situation. And the banter back and forth between the 2 of them and the 3 of them, including Chewie, is quite fun. I have no complaints about that scene. Then we see a training, and my note is, oh, maybe Daisy Ridley can't act. I thought she did a much better acting job in the previous 2 films. I'm guessing that she's had enough. So they collect some stuff on the Falcon. That's Finn, Poe, and Chewie. They get some information from a contact and fly off. But it's never set up who this contact is, how they know this contact, how they know that this contact has the information they need. He says about 3 words to them, and then is never seen again. In fact, one of my notes is, this entire film feels like it's in fast forward. Why are we suddenly skipping between all of these planets with no time to set up or conclude any of the story arcs on any of them? We keep skipping around all over the place. There's a bit... Where's my note on that bit? There's a bit in the film where they do what Finn and Poe call light speed skipping, where they go into hyperspace, come back out of hyperspace in a new location, and they fly around a bit trying to lose the TIE fighters for them. Then they go into hyperspace again, and they go out of hyperspace again, and skip around a bit, and they keep doing this back and forth. The whole film felt like that to me. We never actually establish any of the locations or settings or characters. We just jump between them with no rhyme or reason to tell us what the hell's going on. What else happens in here? Oh, the next thing we know is that the First Order is going to invade all of the worlds. How the hell are they going to do that? How big is their fleet? We don't know. Apparently, they went from having all their shit ruined in the first one to suddenly having a galaxy invading force in the second one. How they got this, nobody knows. My note for this film is I feel like there is more depth in a single episode of The Mandalorian than there is in this entire film. After they do their hyperspace skipping, we're back at the Rebel base, and oh look, all of the random bullshit characters they made up get to turn up for a single line during their planning scenes. And then we have Poe explaining in great detail how Palpatine's back. How he knows that what happened to Palpatine before, we'll never know. Because none of the characters present ever met Palpatine. Leia never met him on screen. None of the others existed last time Palpatine was on the scene. So how do they even know who he is? We don't know. How do they know anything about him? We don't know. But we get Poe's gloriously in-depth explanation of how Palpatine came back, and it is exactly this. Somehow, Palpatine has returned. Great work on your storytelling there. Hello there, Mr. Purple and Rory and Jenny Morgan in the chat. I see it's lovely to see you all here while I complain about Disney. Now, my next note is as follows. A Sith Wayfinder. Let's introduce more and more one-line MacGuffins. But at least they gave Rose Tico a desk job rather than letting her get in the way of any more military operations. Oh, my next note says Rey's belt looks cheap. There's a particular camera shot where it is a close-up on her belt for some reason, and I don't think it was meant to be filmed from the angle it's filmed at. No one in this film has enough dialogue to, yet it feels like everyone talks too much. Now, we get back to the Sith planet of Exegol, and we see that Palpatine has an absolutely enormous fleet of planet-destroying Star Destroyers. Where did he get these? Nobody knows. We don't know where he got the resources to build this enormous. And also, who the hell's crewing them? He's on a secret, supposedly Sith planet in the middle of nowhere. Who built these and who is crewing these? Nobody knows. It's never explained in the film. The peoples, Rey, Finn, and Poe and Chewie, go to another planet, and they're supposed to be undercover, but they all walk around obviously standing out from the natives on the planet, not wearing any kind of disguise or even a face covering. Suddenly Lando Calrissian shows up. And he starts introducing, somebody else starts introducing him, and someone else says, no, we already know who this is. How do you already know who this is? We've never met him before in these films. We have not seen him since Return of the Jedi. Of course, if you read the books, he's been doing loads of stuff in this time period, so we'll ignore that. Oh, Ray walks off mid-conversation with one of the locals on this planet, which I thought was rather rude. Oh, and suddenly they've established that you can pass things between people, physical objects between people in a force vision now. That's new, and I'm sure they'll make use of it later. But it's not established in any kind of meaningful way. It's just suddenly done. It's not brought up as something that... None of the characters mention that this thing they've is amazing or different in any way. They just do it, even though it's never happened before in any of the films. They get into a chase scene in which they are very surprised that stormtroopers have jetpacks. Why are they surprised that stormtroopers have jetpacks when jetpacks have existed in this universe for literally thousands of years, and there have been jet troopers in use by the Empire for literally decades, which Finn, as a former stormtrooper, should know? Nobody knows. Why is this surprising? We don't know. Leia says, never underestimate a droid, in a voice that sounds almost like a droid, because they had to recycle the few lines they'd managed to get her to say before Carrie Fisher, unfortunately, was no longer with us. I do appreciate that they tried to give her a good send-off in this film, but some of the lines she says are kind of out of place. We do get to see Rey finally acting like a Jedi. For a very brief moment. She finds an injured snaky monster on a planet they're on, and rather than doing what all the others were hoping she would do and cutting it apart with her lightsaber, she uses the Force to heal its injury, and it slithers off happy. She acts like a Jedi is supposed to for one brief moment in this film. Unfortunately, it's the only time she does. Once again, she pulls new Force powers out of her ass, suddenly being able to do Force lightning, even though it's at a time she doesn't really want to. Though, and that's kind of fun. But then we get to a scene which demonstrates to me the major overarching problem with this entire film. Where suddenly they show up on another planet. It is a snow-covered planet. It looks like a den of scum and villainy, filled with smugglers and underground black markets, nefarious characters, and all kinds of such things. My note for as soon as they turn up on this planet is as follows. This place looks interesting. Dark, snowy, and full of smugglers. I bet we'll leave before learning anything about it. They set up some stakes. C-3PO can translate something, but is unable to do so due to an element of his programming. He can read it, but he can't say it. So they decide, through finding some technological solution, that they can get him to read out the translation, but it will result in completely erasing his memory. The stakes have been set. It's a sad moment. They build it up a great deal. Then erase his memory. He reads the line, falls back in the chair. Stands up later, with who any of the people he's with are, and that's played a little bit for laughs and a little bit for emotional impact. Unfortunately, my note was correct. They leaving about it without finding out anything about it other than there's some stormtroopers there. Introduce a new character who, in my notes I've put down, is the only character I am worried about not making it through the film at any moment, because this character is new and has no backstory established other than knowing Poe previously. It's the only character I thought they might have the guts to kill off, because it's a character that has no established backstory, but is apparently known by one of the others. So I thought they might have tried to pull off a little bit of emotional weight by killing that one off. Of course they don't, but it was a moment of tension in an otherwise lacking... let me try that sentence again. It was a moment of tension in a film that otherwise severely lacks it. After we see a lightsaber duel between Rey and Kylo. It is quite possibly the worst choreographed lightsaber fight I have ever seen. There are people who will say that the lightsaber duel in the first Star Wars film, now known as A New Hope, is a bit lacking when you compare it to the others, which was understandable at the time. I hadn't figured out what lightsabers were or how they worked, and the props were quite fragile, and the actors were not expert swordsmen. You had Alec Guinness, who was at that point getting on a bit, and David Prowse, who could barely see out of his suit. So they were very cautious not to break the props, while still trying to add tension to the fight scene. I think, considering the limitations they were working with when they made A New Hope, they did a very good job of that fight scene. And considering everything that has come before The Rise of Skywalker, building up to the ability to choreograph, provide music for, and build tension in a fight scene, I don't know if I fuck it up that badly. They are very obviously swinging to miss each other constantly throughout that fight scene. The only moment of tension in it for me was when I thought that she might accidentally force push Finn off the side of the thing they were standing on. Kylo's suddenly holding his lightsaber backwards again for some reason, even though it gives him considerably less reach. And it's not done like it's done in some films, where the choreography makes it make sense. It's done like, I'm just going to hold my lightsaber backwards to look cool, and because it's set up that I'm not going to die because of it, I won't die because of it. It's obvious they're swinging to miss each other throughout the whole fight, and it looks crap. My notes for that scene are: here they go again, swinging to miss, no tension, reverse grip, not even pretending to be aiming for each other anymore. Luke would have killed both of them in 2 seconds flat. Oh, and they blew up that interesting planet without establishing anything about it other than it exists and has snow and smugglers. Luke shows up, not in a very good way. It's better than The Last Jedi, because they try to erase the things they cocked up about Luke's character in The Last Jedi. But he's there. That's about all you can say about him. They do manage to do a nice rousing speech in the build-up to the climax of the film, where they must go down to the Sith planet of Exegol and deal with this big fleet of planet-destroying Star Destroyers. It's a shame about the film that's around the speech, as it makes the speech not make any sense. Oh, and they mentioned that Holdo maneuver from the previous film, the hyperspace ram scene, and how it completely cocks up the continuity of hyperspace. They mention it in passing to say, that's 1 in a million, as if to try to write it off as something that would normally never work. Because they know it completely cocks up the continuity of hyperspace. There was a fun moment where they're suddenly riding cavalry on top of a Star Destroyer. That was kind of fun. I enjoyed it. But immediately after, we have a scene where Rey is fighting Palpatine, and oh dear, Kylo shows up again, swinging a lightsaber around. He pauses for literally 3 seconds, holding the lightsaber still behind himself before someone swings at the lightsaber. They're not swinging to hit him, they're just swinging to hit where he's put the lightsaber, because JJ doesn't know how choreography works. Rey fights Palpatine, defeats him in an absolutely bullshit fashion by pulling another lightsaber out of her ass and crossing them in front of her, deflecting lightning back at him. It's literally why this you got the same problem with Windu in Revenge of the Sith, Palpatine. Have you not learned when somebody is firing your lightning back at you to stop doing it so you don't get all melted, you absolute cockend? All you had to do was turn the lightning off and use force push, and you pushed her off the cliff. What's wrong with you, Palps? You bloody idiot. Overall, my thoughts on the film are as follows. Rey and Kylo are cheap, pale rip-offs of Jason and Jaina Solo. If they'd taken those stories and made them into a sequel trilogy, they'd have actually had something worth doing. Instead, we have these cheap rip-offs. There were some nice moments in the film, particularly at the end when everybody's congratulating each other on the win. But it all feels very hollow because there was no tension building up to it to actually make me care. A lot of people did a very good job on this film. The visual effects people did an excellent job making it look visually beautiful. Music was excellent. A lot of actors involved did a very good job. Unfortunately, the story was not there to back them up. There is a nice moment at the end where Rey has made herself a nice lightsaber out of the staff she's been carrying all this time. It looks quite interesting. It's got a little swivelly middle section to turn it on and off. She goes to Tatooine and buries Luke and Leia's lightsabers in the sand. And some old lady wanders over to her, and this is quite possibly the worst moment of the film. This old lady wanders over to her. She's at Luke Skywalker's aunt and uncle's old moisture farm, which she's decided to take over because I'm going to have your stuff now. You're dead, Luke. The old lady wanders over to him and says, "Who are you?" She says, "Rey." Yeah, Rey who? And you see Luke and Leia, Force ghosts, standing there. She looks at them, they smile, and she says, "Rey Skywalker." That'll be the meme that you see all over the internet lately, where everybody is whatever Skywalker now, because it's quite possibly the stupidest thing ever done in the film. She's not a Skywalker. She's just decided to adopt the title. Now, that's my notes going through the film. Let's have a look at some of the themes of what is wrong with the film overall. How did Palpatine return? It's never explained. There is no attempt at explanation. Oh, Palpatine has returned. When Palpatine himself is asked how he survived, all he says is a callback to the prequels, saying the dark side is a pathway to many abilities some consider to be unnatural. It is quite clear they've just pulled Palpatine out their ass because they accidentally let Rian Johnson kill off the main villain. Kylo supposedly redeems himself, even though he doesn't. It feels contrived and pulled out the film's ass just to please all the Reylo shippers. Spoilers, by the way, I mentioned that at the start and in the title. They do try to rectify the problem from the previous film about who Rey is and who her family are by slapping the title Palpatine's granddaughter onto her. That comes out of nowhere. It doesn't make sense how she ended up where she ended up. It doesn't make sense the plan that Palpatine comes up with. His original directive is to kill the girl, then bring her to him, then kill her again, then not kill her again, then her kill him to do some kind of Force essence transfer, and it makes literally no sense. The plot of the sequel trilogy is completely inconsistent going into it. We just went, oh, we'll make a film, and then we'll make what happens. The final battle has no weight. The sudden arrival of the cavalry at the end of it is quite unsurprising. There is an almost moving moment before it where Poe is apologizing to his allies for leading them to their deaths. But it's not allowed to have any emotional weight. It's as soon as it happens, it's immediately undone, like any moment that could have had emotional weight in this film. There's a bit where Rey thinks she's killed Chewbacca. In literally the next camera cut, you see he's fine. She doesn't know he's fine yet, but the audience does, so there's no tension there. There's no tension with the erasing of C-3PO's memory. As soon as he bumps into R2-D2 again, R2-D2 puts it back. There's no tension in any of the moments where the heroes appear to be in danger. They appear to be in danger, they are given an excuse to get out of danger, and there they go again. There is a lot of wasted potential in this film trilogy, Finn being the main example. A soldier from his early childhood to be nothing but a killing machine, a soldier raised and trained to be the enforcer of an evil regime. His conscience is awakened in The Force Awakens. Why was nothing done with that? He wasn't allowed to develop a relationship with any of the other characters, really. He developed a bit of a bromance with Poe, which many said should have been a romance properly. I think it should have. It would have been a really good way to actually subvert audience expectations and cover new ground, rather than just pretending to tell the story up in the process. There's a lot of fan service in this film that's clearly there just to tug on your nostalgia bone and try to prevent you thinking too much about the plot. Because if you think too much about the plot, you go, oh, fuck, it doesn't actually make any sense whatsoever. Why am I watching this film? The Knights of Ren that Kylo Ren is supposed to be the leader of show up in this film finally and do nothing. They look a bit menacing for a while, then get beaten up by Kylo at the end. There's a little bit at the end where the little wrinkly lady, what's she called, Maz whatever, orange person with the glasses, gives Chewie the medal that he didn't get in the original Star Wars film. Why she gives him this, how she knows he didn't get one, is never established. He has never expressed a desire to receive one, so it's literally just there for the fans. As is a lot of this film. There's a lot of scenes that actually, if you look at them from an in-universe perspective, do not make sense. They only make sense if you know what the audience knows, not what the characters know. When they say, somehow Palpatine has returned, all the characters in the scene react as if they know everything the audience knows that they could not possibly know. Everything feels contrived for the audience's benefit rather than to actually tell a compelling story. Here's a look at this, look at this, look at this. Mr. Purple rhymes with orange. Need to understand the villain's motivation. The villain doesn't even understand the villain's motivation. He's literally just showed up for this film because the villain needed to save the franchise. The villain doesn't have a motivation. His motivation changes depending on the scene. There's no consistency of plan between any of the characters. It says at the start, when Kylo shows up to Palpatine's new Sith house, Kylo says to Palpatine, I killed Snoke. Palpatine says to Kylo, I made Snoke. Why did you make Snoke? What are the mechanics of this? Is it some kind of cloning technology? In which case, why does Snoke look all manky? If it's some kind of cloning technology, were you in control of Snoke throughout the previous two films, or did you just make him and send him out on his way for a laugh? None of the plans that the villains have come up with in these films actually make any sense whatsoever. There is a nice moment at the end where a load of ships that are nicely recognizable show up, and there's a few nice moments peppered throughout the film, and there's even a few creative moments, like having a cavalry charge on top of a Star Destroyer mid-launch. That was enjoyable. That was almost tense. But you knew that everybody named was going to get out of there fine. Because no one who wrote this film had the guts to actually kill off any of the major characters. They'd already killed off too many major characters in the last two, and the fans hated it because they killed off and character assassinated everyone's childhood heroes. Suddenly Luke Skywalker is a sad old man just waiting to die. Han Solo is a washed-up smuggler rather than the battle-hardened New Republic general we get in the books. Their children and legacies are destroyed. Their contribution to the franchise is overwritten, and suddenly you have all these new characters who've got to come in and fix it for the old lot. Because apparently nothing sticks. Not even killing Palpatine in Return of the Jedi. How he survived falling down a reactor shaft, exploding, and then the Death Star itself exploding, we'll never know. There are ways in the books that he did survive such an eventuality, but they could have just read the books and gone, here's how Palpatine survived this event. But no, they didn't do that. They just said, somehow Palpatine's returned. Where's my last notes? The plot is pointless. It's supposed to wrap up the current era of Star Wars. Instead, it dedicates the majority of its runtime to a convoluted quest for a device that will lead the way to a mysterious Sith planet of Exegol that they've just pulled out their ass. The film has so much new ground to cover that audiences can barely breathe before they're whisked from planet to planet to planet to planet, trying a plot that doesn't make any sense because there's no room for it to actually establish any facts about itself. All the new characters are forgettable. I cannot remember the names of a single one of them because they have about too many constant fake deaths and attempts to pull at heartstrings with no weight because you know they're immediately going to wind everything back afterwards. Inconsistency of tone, inconsistency of plot. That's the same as story. I'm having some inconsistency of my thought process now. Some people argue that the film was enjoyable simply because there's swingy lightsabers and blasty blasters and John Williams' epic music. I managed to enjoy a few moments of it. And that's about all I can say for it. It's better than the last one, but it's not a good film. I'm going to rate it 2 out of 10. It's functionally a film. I'm sure people who judge it entirely by itself, without the context of it being supposedly part of Star Wars, will rate it more favorably. I don't. I am a Star Wars Legends Expanded Universe purist. Anything that goes against the content of the books is by definition wrong. I don't mean the new books that Disney have started churning out left and right. Now, while I have your attention, I am going to tell you a little about the one area of Disney Star Wars that I do recommend. That being The Mandalorian Show. I don't recommend you pay for Disney Plus to watch it, but I don't consider it canon Star Wars because it contradicts many things about Mandalorian culture, and it's leading towards the creation of the First Order, which is, of course, bullshit. However, if you can ignore the bits where it gets Mandalorian culture wrong and the bits where it gets Star Wars continuity wrong, Mandalorian is actually enjoyable. It's well written. This is good. The tension of the story moments are there and good. It's the only thing, I think, at this point, keeping Star Wars going. So if you haven't seen The Mandalorian Show and you can get it without paying Disney for the privilege, check it out. Now, I think that's just about all I've got for you right now. However, I'm going to do a little after show if anyone's interested. I will put a link to it in the chat of this one, and anyone who would like to drop in and discuss any of the stuff I've said about can do so. Let me just set that up. It'll be going live very shortly. Rise of Shitwalker after show. Let's put that. This thing never works how it's supposed to, does it? So thank you very much for coming, everyone. I'm about to put a link to the after show in the chat. It'll be going live shortly. Thank you for coming. I have been Bad Tempered Badger. After show is in the chat.